No, we didn't. Okay, so Zokta Gemara. We're discussing uncle's wife. So the halacha is Eishes Ache Ha'av Mina'av. If your father has a brother, and your father shares a father with his brother, so your father's brother and their brothers through their father, his wife, so your father's brother's wife, is usher to you, midai rice. However, what about if your father has a brother, but they only share a mother? Then the wife of that uncle is mutter to you midai rice, but that is one of the shniyos that's usher to you midai rabban. What happens if it's your mother's brother? Now, your mother's brother, no matter how this man is your mother's brother, his wife is mutter to you midai rice. However, if it's your mother's brother and she shares with that brother a father, then there's also an Isur D'Rabbanan. It's called one of the Shniyos that we listed off yesterday. The question that the Gemara discusses here, what if it's your mother's brother, but she only shares a mother with him? Is that also in the net, in the big net, the wide net that was cast to Aser? And the Gemara shows us that you make Gzeris l'Gzeris. You cast wide nets. Because just like we said, any grandmother, no matter what side it's from, is going to be Aser because you call her Bobby. And any grandfather's wife is Zaidi's wife, is also Aser no matter what side it's from, whether there's a Makar Midaraisa or not. Maybe we also say that any uncle's wife would be Aser no matter how it works out that way, because once we Aser one type of uncle's wife, we Aser all uncle's types of wives. And that's the shaila that we left off with yesterday. And now the Gemara is going to be pushing that shaila. So we are over here at the Toshma. So it's about 20 lines from the bottom. And it's the second word on the line. Toshma. The Chiyasa Rabbi Huda Bar Shila. Omar. Rabbi Huda Bar Shila told us a very interesting chiddush, halacha. And he said as follows. Amri b'Marava. They used to say in Marava, Kol shebenekeva erva, any woman that's an erva, bizachar, if that woman would be a man, and I don't mean because she trans, I mean if it would in that same relation, if it was a boy in that position, gazru al ishtoi, his wife will also be aser mishum shniya because of the derbanan. So this sounds like a simple rule, but we need to see how it applies in real life. V'amar Rava, and Rava said, Uchalalahu. Rava says, I'm going to give you several examples of this exact arrangement where, in fact, we don't aser midrabban. And let's look at a couple. Chamoisai, one's mother-in-law, erva, is aser to him. One may not marry his mother-in-law. It says, ervas isho bita loy segale, it's a chiyav kares. But eishes chamo, what about his father-in-law's wife? So that's exactly this case. You take the mother-in-law out, the male version of the mother-in-law is the father-in-law. His wife is mutter, and there's no gzeira on that at all. Thank you very much, Rabbi. So we already have one example of where this rule doesn't apply. Let's try a second example. Bas chamoisai, the daughter of his mother-in-law, is an erva. It's called achoishisha. It's his wife's sister. But if his wife had a brother, and that brother was married, there's no problem with you marrying him if once he gives her a get. Eishes ben chamoisai, the wife of the son of my daughter-in-law, in other words, my brother-in-law, the wife of my brother-in-law, muteris is in Gans and Mutter. Let's try a third one on. Bas Chamo, the daughter of my father-in-law. Once again, my wife's sister, Erba, that's Asrat Achois Isha. But Eishes ben Chamo, if my wife has a brother, my brother-in-law, and my wife shares a father with this brother-in-law, his wife, muteris, it's Mutter. Let's try another one out precise. Chargosai, my wife's son, meaning my stepchild, Kargasai, a stepdaughter, Erva is Aser, the Isser, Kares. But Eishes Chargai, if my daughter has a son, so my stepson, and he's married, that woman is mutter to me, muteris. Let's try another one on. Bas Chargasai, the daughter of my stepdaughter. So my wife comes into a marriage with her own daughter, and that daughter has another daughter. Erva, that's Aser, because that's the granddaughter of my wife, right? You're not allowed to marry a woman, her daughter, or her granddaughter. However, Eishes ben Chargai, but if my wife has a son that you brought into the marriage from somewhere else, and this son has a son, and that son is married, muteris, that will be mutter. So we've had a whole slew of examples where this rule that they discuss in Ma'arava does not apply. So because of that, we need to know where it does apply. In what possible case does this rule apply? Let's suggest that it's referring to our exact case. My love, lo yisuye eshes achaya ein minayin. Let's say that what it's trying to tell us is what's usher, my uncle's wife, but my uncle is only my uncle because he shares a mother with my mother. And there we say the chol shebelekeva erva. If it was my mother's sister, it would be an erva bezachar gozru ishtoi mishum shniya. And that would be what the issue is talking about. So we have a raya from here that my uncle's wife, and this fellow is only my uncle because he shares a mother with my mother. It's also midrabanan because of this rule. Because if this was a woman, meaning my mother's sister, it would definitely be also to me. So therefore, my mother's sister-in-law will also be also to me. Let's see Rashi. If this was an nekeva, it would be an erva. My mother's sister, even though she only shares a mother with this sister of hers, so my aunt, erva, is going to be an us, is going to be issur deraisa. You're not allowed to marry your mother's sister. In Perak Abal Yevimtai, the Gemara darshins, bein mina av bein minaim. Your mother's sister is usher to you, whether or not they share a father or they share a mother. So therefore, if a male was in that position, his wife would be usher to you. So now we've. I'm sorry. Even though it applies only to one thing, it applies to this case. Your uncle, your mother's brother's wife, is going to be usher because of this klal. All the other ones on the list are not usher. So Zok to Gemara. Why is it that in this case, with your mother's brother, there we decide to make a zikah, but all the other ones that we listed, I think 5 examples of places where this rule doesn't apply. Zok Gemara, I'll tell you the difference. Ha bechat kedushin mekarabla. Hani adi katre kedushin loy mekarabla. Let's think about it. My mother's brother, right? How am I related to this woman that's going to become usher to me, his wife? It's a complete blood relation, except for one marriage. The fact that my mother's brother married her. But I'm related to him through a direct blood relation. But if you look at all of these relationships that the Gemara lists off, where this rule does not apply, there it takes 2 marriages to create the issur. And let's just look at one of them. Because if we look at all of them, it'll take us forever. So let's take a look. Chamoisoi erba, eishes chamav muteris. Eishes chamav, the wife of my father-in-law. So there's 2 marriages there. He had to marry this woman, that's married to a woman, and I had to marry my wife. So there, and all of these in the list are all relatives of my wife. So therefore, they involve 2 marriages. If I'm 2 marriages away from the erva, then they don't answer. But in the case of the uncle, I'm only 1 marriage away, my uncle's marriage, but everything else is a direct blood related relative, and therefore the Gemara answers. So v'chad kedushin mekarablo, hani adi ikatrei kedushin loy mekarablo. Blood is thicker than water. Zok to Gemara weiter. Sholach lei Rab Mesharshi misusnaya to Rav Papi. Rab Mesharshi from Susnaya sent a question to Rav Papi. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us the following question. Eishes ache avia. So we're going up 1 additional generation. The wife of my grandfather's brother, so my great uncle. Eishes ache, the wife of the brother of Avia. So my father's brother, which means my great uncle's wife, or v'achois aviav, or the sister of my grandfather. So my great uncle's wife, or my great aunt. Mahu, would that also be usher midirabban? Midalamata erva, since 1 level down, my father's brother is an erva. So my father's brother should also be also midrabanon. Midalamata erva lamayla nami gozru bay. They were gozru even one generation up. Ideal mahos palagdarta, or maybe the fact that we're one generation removed from that relationship, maybe the Rabbanan did not ask. Tashma, let's bring a raya. Mahin shniyos like chashav lubadayu. On Amar Aleph, we had a big brisa that discussed all the shniyos, right? I think there were 8 of them listed over there. There were 8 of them listed over here, and it doesn't list this one. So obviously it's not one of them. How many are listed? It's very important that we know the number. Emimo is 1, Emav is 2, Eshes Avi Avav is 3, Eshes Avi Imo is 4, Eshes Achiav Min Aim is 5, Eshes Achiav Min Av is 6, Kalas Benoy is 7, Kalas Bita is 8. So there's 8 listed, and this did not make the list. So don't you have a pretty good riot that that's probably not usher? Zok Gemara, no. Ton of a shire. Mishnayos often make a list, but they omit some of the list. Not all of the lists are conclusive. But furthermore, we also know that the Tanya never just singles out one item to miss. If the Tanya is going to miss some things, it's not going to be a conclusive list. He's going to omit at least 2 things. So my shire, the high shire, what else is left out? So Gemara, very simple. We're soon going to have a whole other list of 6 additional isurim that aren't in the list of 8 that we discussed on Amar Aleph. Zok the Gemara. So because of that, the Gemara wants to suggest that these relations will be usher. So what was his question about? 2 cases. My great aunt by being my grandfather's sister, or my great aunt by being my grandfather's brother's wife, right? Those were the 2 relations that the Gemara is probing. A memer achshar be'eshes achi avi aviv. A memer was matter you to marry your great aunt, whether it's because she married your great uncle, or because she's the sister of your grandfather. A memer was mekel. Amalei Rav Hillel Rav Ashi. Rav Hillel told Rav Ashi, I don't know how you could be mekel. I don't know how a memer could be mekel. I saw a memo that Mar Barei de Ravna wrote, and on the memo he wrote a list of the different isurim midarabanon, and uchsivan shitzuri lisura. I know that he wrote there that there's 16 shniyos that are also. Now let's see how you get to the number of 16. My love, tamni demasnisa. We counted 8 were listed on Amar Aleph. The shis, the Be'er Pchia. We're soon going to talk about Reb Pchia, but Reb Pchia said there were 6. So 6 plus 8 is 14. We're missing 2. So wouldn't it make sense to say Bahanach Tarti? If you hold it, these 2 are usher. The great aunts are usher. Boom, you have your 18. And it works out perfectly. So that must be that they're usher. The Hashitzari. Fact Gemara, it's not 16, you're not counting good. Ulatamech, Shivsari Havin. Did you not forget the Gemara we just learned a moment ago? Because we just added to the list the Ika Eshes Achia Aim Minaim. The Pashtina Isura, right? Just a moment ago, we added one, which is your mother's brother's wife, if she only shares a mother with that brother. So we have now 17. It's not shver that you have an extra one. You know why? Because Hanach Tarti, the shiloh that we just discussed about the great aunt, whether it's your grandfather's sister or your grandfather's brother's wife, the Damin Lahadadi, they're very similar in nature. Therefore, Kechad Chashav Lahu, Bashitri of 16. At the end of the day, how could you be matir? We saw Marbarid Rabna has a list of 16, and you cannot complete a list of 16 without the great uncle, the great aunts. So shouldn't that be a raya that those relations are also? Amalei, he said, let me ask you a question. You want to bring a raya l'chumra from this memo? Let me ask you the opposite way. What if it would have said in the memo that these are mutter? Would you have relied on this memo? The Marbarei the Rabber, he didn't sign. It was like a little scrap paper that you want to build from. You would never dare be makel because of that scrap paper. Now that it says that it's usher, you can't bring a raya. Lav Marbarei the Rabber chasam alayu. It wasn't signed. It wasn't an official psak. It was just a scratch paper, and therefore you can't bring any rayas la'alacha from there. I remember when I was in Philadelphia, there was a boy. Today he's actually He's married to a wolf girl, Eli Obam. Remember Eli Obam? So Eli Obam, today he has a big company. He sends like Shalachmonis packages all over the world. There's packages all over the world. They even had a write-up on him once in one of the Jewish newspapers. So this Eli Obam, on a math test, he wrote as the answer to one of the questions, he wrote +3. Let's say the answer was +3, +3. And the teacher gave it to him wrong, because the teacher said it looked like a -3. So he wanted to appeal to the principal that his answer was right, because he wrote +3. And the teacher misread it by saying -3. But the principal always sided with the teacher. So you couldn't just ask the principal straight out, because the principal for sure sided against him. Now again, he wrote +3, and the teacher said -3. So he goes to the principal and says, "Come on, doesn't this look like a -3?" So the principal said, "No, it looks like a +3." He said, "Yeah, come tell the teacher." So he outsmarted the principal, because he knew the principal would automatically take the opinion that he didn't want. Right? So he came back. So the principal said, "No, that's not what I mean. I mean, it's not clear. It's not clear when the mother said it wrong." But he got him. It was too late. So that's over here. If it's not clear, you can't bring a right. Tani Devei Reb Chia. The Bishmeish of Reb Chia learned the following: Shlishi shebe benoi, v'shebe bitoi, v'shebe ben ishtoi, v'shebe bas ishtoi. Very simple cases. So Rashi says Shlishi shebe benoi means the third generation after the son. So Bas ben benoi, the daughter of your grandson, which would mean your great granddaughter. So your great granddaughter is going to be Aser. V'shebe bitoi. It also means your great granddaughter, but it's your great granddaughter through your daughter, right? So the third generation, where do we start counting generation number one? Generation number one is your child, their child, and their child. So it's 3 generations below you, not counting you, right? So these 3 generations are going to be Aser. The same things, if it's his wife's children, Shnia, they will be Aser midirma. But Revi Shebechamav v'Shebechamoisai. But when you're counting up, you count 4 generations. So let's see Rashi how you count these 4 generations. Dar Revi Shebechamav Hainu Aim Chamav. The grandmother of his father-in-law, which would be the Hudar Revi Leishta. If you start counting from the first generation of Israel of Chamav, so Chamav is 1. His mother and her mother, that's 3 generations. But if you count the generation that he's in, means his wife's generation, it works out to 4 generations. So when we're counting up, we're counting the generation that he's in. But when we're counting down, we're not counting the generation that he's in. So the Gemara is going to question that in a minute. But whatever it is, he said, Shlishi sheve b'noi v'sheve bitoi, v'sheve ben ishtoi, v'sheve bas ishtoi, 3 generations down, are shni are asim midrabanan. Counting up, it's Revi's 4 generations. Sheba Chamav, Sheba Chamoisai will be also awesome with your body. So Amalei Rabbeinu Ravashi, Maishna Lamaila, the Gachashav Lala Ishtai. When you're counting generations going up, you count your own generation, which is your wife, and therefore the great grandmother is 4th generation, called Revi. Maishna Lamata, when we're counting down to future generations, we say that my great grandchild is only the 3rd generation. Like Gachashav Lala Ishtai. I'm sorry? Well, why can't you put them in both places? You start from your generation to count up, and you start from your generation to count down. So tomorrow, very, very simple. L'mayla, when you're counting up, the only reason why his father-in-law, his mother-in-law asked him is because of his wife. So we're going through his wife to create that Isser. Therefore, since the Isura Mekoich Ishtoi Ka'asi, the Isser is only because of his wife, we mention her when we're counting. But Lamato, where the reason why his children are also because they're directly blood related to him, not through anybody else. That's why he doesn't count his wife as a generation. Besides the B'nai and B'itoi, the Bryce lists off Ben Ishtoi and Bas Ishtoi as well. There for sure he's going through his wife. And doesn't count her. Because I did the Tana Shloisha Doris Lamata Didei. Really, we're focusing on his children, where it's only 3 generations because you don't count because he's directly related to them. But Chashva doesn't mention a 4th generation, referring to his generation. Therefore, it doesn't count her on the way down. Okay, Zok the Gemara Biter. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi asked Rav Kahana the following questions. Shniyos devei Rav Chia. So now we got the additional 6 that Rav Chia added, right? Shlishi shev b'noi, shev b'itoi, ben ishtoi, bas ishtoi, and chamav and chamoisa. So those were the 6 additional shniyos. So 6 plus 8 is 14, plus the other 2, which was going to be the 60. So these shniyos devei Rav Chia, yesh lam hefsek or ein lam hefsek. The Brayta mentions you count down 3 generations, you count up 4 generations. Does it go further or not? Toshma, the Gemara wants to bring a right. The Amar Rav, Dalad Noshim, Yesh Lahem Hefsek. There's 4 women in the discussion that we had on Daf Chaf Aleph Amar Aleph, that the Erva does not continue, the Easter doesn't continue many generations, it stops at that generation. If you remember, Rav said there were 4. Rav only knew 3 of them, so Rav listed 3 of them that stop at that generation, they don't continue, and Ziri added a 4. But it's only those 4 that stop. Vice all the others continue on, no matter how many generations it is. The Suloi, yet doesn't list off any other than those 4. Vice all other shniyos go on forever. So you don't have a raya. Rav was commenting on the list of shniyos in that particular brisa. Of those 8, 4 do not go on forever. But other ones like Rav Chia shniyos, maybe they do go on forever. So it's not conclusive. Yes.
At what point, at what generation, would they not be considered a zaken? Like,
if the shniyos are ein lahem hefsek, it never is mutter. No matter how many generations you go up or down.
Didn't we have wasn't one of the things of being a zaken as not being I forgot what it was exactly, but wasn't one of the ones listed being a zaken as being
someone who's old?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't one of the shniyos. We're talking about all relations, like a grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather.
Right, but how could it be? How can you actually do?
You're thinking of Shlomi Feinter was saying. You're thinking that there's an Isser Yevamos with somebody who doesn't have children because he's too old. But we're discussing nothing to do with Yevamos. We're discussing what women are not allowed. Are you not allowed to marry?
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so Dr. Gemara, Minayu Bey, from the list that Reb Chia offered, doesn't it tell us Shlishi Urvi? Shlishi Urvi in Tveiloi. It says 3 generations. So what's your shiloh if it goes on forever? Isn't it pretty clear from what he said that it's 3 generations or 4 generations? Tveiloi. So no. It means even going on further will be usher. But it doesn't mean to say dafka the 3rd generation and not more. So it's not a raya. It's not a raya. So let's stop a second. The Gemara doesn't pass in the shiloh. The Gemara remains unconclusive. So what is Allah Alamaisa? What is Allah Alamaisa? Just in case someone was interested, what is Allah Alamaisa? So there are shittas in the Shem who are machmer and passing that it's also. So you might ask, how could you be machmer? Isn't this a case of sakafik derabanan lakula? This is only a shaila of whether or not there's a gzer derabanan on these women, right? And we don't know if there is, because the Gemara remains inconclusive. So why could you go to chumrah? So isn't there a real sakafik derabanan lakula? So there's a whole shaila when you say sakafik derabanan lakula. When the Gemara has a shaila halacha, is that called a sakafik derabanan? Or maybe then you go to chumrah. Anytime the Gemara blibes with an unknown, it's the chumrah. Sakafik means you're not sure if something happened or not. That's when you say sakafik derabanan lakula. But if it's a machlokes, maybe you don't say sakafik derabanan lakula. There's a shaila about it. Amalei Rav Rab Nachman. Now we're going to get into another very interesting topic. Chazi Mar Haimer Rabbanon, the Osimai Marav. I saw a fellow who came as a guest speaker, a scholar in residence. He came from Marava. Omar, and he shared with us the following interesting question. Nevertheless, once a ger becomes a ger, we don't let him marry his mother, which would be an erva d'oraisa. But the question is, do we let him marry any one of these isurim d'rabbanan that we listed up? Isurim that would be osur mid'oraisa as an erva, that we will not let a ger do, even though he's kekatan shenoila. But do they go so far to asur shniyos as well? So zok the Gemara, gazu shniyos begerim, oiloi gazu shniyos begerim. Amala, he said, well, think about it. Uma erva gufa. Erba a guy used to live with his mother, to live with his sister. If it wasn't for the fact, ilav shelo yoimru boin mikdusha chamura alachdusha kala lagazu barabam. Really, a guy should be allowed to marry his mother once he's katan shenoila. The only reason why we say he can't is because we'll never say that someone can become Jewish and the halachas get relaxed. He has it easier. Whenever someone becomes a ger, we have to say that there are more restrictions imposed upon him, not less. And it's because of that shita. We never let him encounter a kula. So if it wasn't for that, we would have even allowed him to marry his mother. So surely shniyos we should not impose upon. Madech, we wouldn't have answered his mother. Koshgen, we shouldn't answer shniyos. Am I reading wrong? Is he saying he would answer? He wouldn't answer. Masha wouldn't answer. Yeah. Why would he do it? He becomes Jewish, and now he marries a Jewish woman. He'll become Jewish, and after he becomes Jewish, let him marry a Jewish woman. Let's say she did.
Okay, so in that case, in terms of herself,
We still don't let him marry her.
we think what if she is becomes again, but then she is also subject to the same law.
Correct.
So then we can't have the case.
Why not? They're both katan shenoila. They should both be able to marry each other. But in order that people shouldn't say that it's less chomerdik if you become Jewish, we have to say that you retain the same chomer. And halacha l'maisa, if the guy came from a religion or in secular law there was something that was not allowed, and in Jewish law it's allowed, we actually are machmir, because we'll never let any ger be megayer and get a leniency out of it.
There's cases where we say Gary is and it's a cool. I can't remember what it was.
Why shniyos?
Well, I think
If he owes you money, oh, he doesn't pay back. Oh, I don't know. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. Amar Rav Nachman, Zok Rav Nachman, Gerim, Hoyel v'Asal Yadin. Since we're in the subject of Gerim, Leim Eluhu Milsa. Let me tell you another interesting halacha, another interesting chiddush about it. Achin mina'im lo ya'id. If there were two goyim that became gerim, and now they're brothers and they share a mother, they should not say edus. They cannot say edus. V'im he'idu, but if they did say edus and edus, their edus will be a good edus. Zok Rashi, edus and edus, the kakat and shenayla dami, because technically is kakat and shenayla dami. So therefore they're not related anymore. But achin min ha'av, me'idin lechatchila, they're even lechatchila allowed to say edus, because the pasuk says about the man's input into a pregnancy is zirmas susim zirmasan. Hilchach kurvas av einer kurva. We don't recognize the relationship of a father in Judaism. That's why Father's Day in Harlem is a very confusing day. Okay. Zakt Gemara Ameimar Omar Afilu Achin min ha'em nami me'idin lechatchila. Achin min ha'em can say edus lechatchila. How come by Arias we do consider those relationships and we don't allow him to marry his mother? Zaktimur, I'll tell you why. Everyone gets married. So everyone, if we allow a ger to marry his mother, other people might think, hey, it's mutter, because everyone engages in marriage. You don't need a bezdin to deal with marriage. So therefore we have to be stricter. But edus levezin masur. Who is the one who listens to Edom and pastors according to the testimony of Edom? Bezdin. Bezdin will know the difference between brothers that are gerim and brothers that aren't gerim. The gershon is ger kekatan shenoiladam. So this whole shiloh, where do we know gershon is ger kekatan shenoiladam? What is the makor of gershon is ger kekatan shenoiladam? That's one question I'm going to ask. Another question I'm going to ask is, a ger, does he have to have kibud aved, or he's no longer related to his mother? So there was a woman who was a Geyeris, and she had a family, and she sort of severed from her family because it's not a good influence for her children. And her mother got not well, and she wanted her to come with her children to visit her. and she asked the child to Reb Moshe if she's allowed to go. Reb Moshe said, Avada, you still have a chiv to go because it's a blood relative. However, you have to be very careful to make sure that your children aren't going to start socializing with their old relatives, because that, of course, could lead to them being influenced to want to change their lifestyle. But let's focus on where do we know Gerish and Esgar Kikot and Shanoy Ladami. So there's a couple of fascinating sources for that. So the pasuk says in Kiseitze, Loi Sata Mishpat Ger Yosem. Someone should not change the judgment of a Ger or a Yosem. Now, if you look at this word Ger Yosem, the Targum teaches it. A Ger is not a Yosem. A Ger is a Ger. Yosem is a Yosem. What do you mean Ger Yosem? So the Targum teaches it. Din Giyura V'Yitama. Don't ruin, don't distort the psak halacha for a ger, and don't distort the psak halacha for a yosem. But if you look at the Balaturim says ger yosem, v'lo yomer ger v'yosem. It doesn't say ger v'yosem. It says ger yosem. Zok the Balaturim lo yomer lach gerish in this gayer kekatan shenayil dam. Every ger by definition is a yosem. Ger yosem. Why? Because gerish in this gayer kekatan shenayil dam. So that is one makar. That is one makar for Gerish and Esgar Katan Shenayil Dami. The other makar is a very interesting makar, and it's going to we're going to have problems. We need Dave Zalti here to help us sort this out. But let's see what it says over here. So after the Torah was given in the Eschanon by Kabbalah Torah, it says, Leich emor lahem, shuvu lachem lahalechem. And we know alechem means marriages. Go back to your marriages. Meaning, even if you were married to women that, according to Jewish law, would be usher to you, go back to those marriages. So you see, Gerish and Esgar, Kikot Shenayil Dami. Frank, Dave Zolti, it says Boichel Mishpachaisov. I saw that in your eyes. It says Boichel Mishpachaisov. Klaisa was crying that now they have to ruin their families because they've just found out that they were now illegal to be living with their spouses. That's a huge problem. So there's a couple of answers to this. The Meshech Chochmah answers this question as saying they weren't crying about current marriages. They can keep all their wives. It's not a problem. But moving forward, they had their eyes. They wanted their son to marry their daughter because why should I dilute my money? And now I can't do that. So they were upset about future shidduchim that they would now have to avoid. That's what the Meshech Chochmah. However, the Shab Shemaita asked this kasha in the Akdama, and he brings down a Maharal. And the Maharal says something very fascinating. He says, when do you say Gerish and Esgar, Kikot and Shenayil Dami, and therefore all the relations will be mutter? That's if someone was Magayer willingly. But since when we were Magayer by Kabbalah Torah, it was Kafa Aleinu Har Kegigos, and we were forced into it, we don't have the halacha of Gerish and Esgar, Kikot and Shenayil Dami, and therefore, in fact, their wives were usher, and that's why it was Boichel Mishpachaisa. I don't know where the morale gets it from. That there's a difference between Gerish that's done voluntarily, which is Kekot Shenayil Dami, you're reinventing yourself, or Gerish that's imposed. And Rav Naftali Trop has a third mahalach, and here's where we for sure need Dave Zolti for this, because he says that Klal Yisrael did not become Jews at Kabbalah Torah. They were Jewish already when they left Mitzrayim, or maybe even more. They became Jewish earlier, but they upgraded their membership in the Judaism club by Kabbalah Torah. But they were already Yidden before. So therefore, the Kabbalah Torah didn't give them a din of Kekot and Shenayil Dami. So I'm asking David, did you ever hear such a thing that our Judaism set in stages?
No, except for Mora. A few mitzvahs were given at Mora, but that just doesn't work because the bris happened at Har Sinai. The deal.
So maybe that was our laws, but maybe as a nation, if you ask a real non-Haredi Zionist, they'll say there's Jewishness and then there's a Torah. They're not all bound together, so maybe they have a point.
Don't confuse Jews. Don't confuse Judaism and Jews. Two separate things. Yeah, that I heard of.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to share. That's right. Yeah. So that's what I'm telling you. Okay, let's think more about it.
Because at that point, we come out with a wasn't how you.
That's what Rabbi Trump says in the Chachamim.
So
Yeah.
that's where that relationship is considered
Yeah.
a masculine relationship comes in. In terms of the rules.
Maybe the details came later. Yeah. Yeah, could be. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. Misha yesh lo ach mikol mokem. If somebody has a bigeret brother, I wouldn't want to be the ach mikol mokem. I want to be the brother. Yeah. Someone has to be a brother. So we're gonna soon see what type of brother that means. Zoikik es eishes achav liibum. Any brother will be mechayev a woman to do ibum. So if a woman's married to a man and the man has no children, then that has no brothers, then there's no ibum. But if he has any type of brother, then his wife, his almana, will be zakat ibum. And no matter this brother, who's just any old brother, is a brother lagabi al halachas. Except the only brother that's not considered his brother, the Inyan Yibam, is chutz mimi sheyesh le'ach min hashivcha u min ha'evedes kechavim. If someone's father fathered a sibling for him, but he fathered a sibling through a shivcha or through a goy, that's not called his brother. Such a brother would not be mechayev a woman in Yibam. Mi sheyesh le'ben mikol mokem. If someone has any type of child, poiter eishes avav min ha'yibam. It would pater the almana of his wife from Ibam. V'chayiv al makosoi val kilosoi. And if this child hits his father or curses his father, he'll be machayiv. Uvenoy l'chal davar, it's considered a son for al halachas. Chutz mimi sheyesh loy ben min hashivcha u'min ha'evedes kechavim. That's not considered a son, and that would not pater her from Ibam. Zok the Gemara mikol mokim latsuyimai. We're trying to say this is not a first-class brother, it's a bia brother. Exactly what type of brother is a second-class citizen? If somebody has a brother that's a mamzer, that's still someone who's mechayiv his almon and yibum. Meaning a woman could fall to yibum to a mamzer. In fact, Gemara Pshita, Achafu, why would I think that a woman wouldn't fall to yibum to her brother-in-law who was a mamzer? He still is her brother. Zok Gemara, you might have thought that we learn what type of brother is a brother for Yibam, a brother like the brothers of the Shvatim, which were Ksherim, they were not Mamzer. That even a Mamzer is considered a brother, and it would be Machai of a woman to do Yibam. Correct Gemara. The Ema Hachanami, maybe it's not there's no chiyuvim. Maybe we say that in fact that there's no chiyuvim. So kivan yibum mifter nifter. Since if someone had a child a mamzer, it would pater his wife. I'm doing yibum. Therefore, miskik zokik. If you have a brother a mamzer, he will mechayiv this woman to do the yibum. Okay. More about it. It's his brother al halachas. L'mai halachas for what halachas? L'yershoy u'litamaloi. A is the brother has a din Yerusha, he can yarshin his brother. He has a legal claim to yarshin his brother. But l'tamiloi, if his brother is a kohen, the kohen has to be matama to his brother who's a mamzer, because it says kim l'sheira akarvelov l'bnoel doi one of the items in the list of who a kohen has to be matama for is his brother. In fact, Pshita Achav, it's his brother. So to the more it says one of the relations that a kohen's allowed to be matam for is for his wife. But the first item on the list is l'sheirei hakarav elav. Now, when it comes to a wife, not every wife can be matama. Only a wife who is legally allowed to marry. Sometimes a husband is not allowed to be matame for his wife. Yesh baal shematame, yesh baal she'ein matame. Sometimes a husband could be matame for his wife, and sometimes not. Haketzat matame hu l'ishtay kshera. Which wife does he have a mitzvah to be matame himself for? To be Yosy in the kfura? That's if he was legally married to her. Ve'ein matame l'ishtay psula. But he wasn't allowed to be matame himself if the woman was usher. So hachanami maybe matame hu la'ach kosher ve'ein matame la'ach kosher. Maybe the ula'achiv is only referring to an achkosher, but maybe he's not allowed to be matame for a brother who's a mamzer. Kamash malon that even a brother who's a mamzer is allowed to be matame for him. Maybe not. The Gemara is a very big difference. Hasam lafuka kaima. The reason why you're not metama for a wife who's usher to you is because you're supposed to be divorcing her. So we don't look at it. We don't give her the credit, the credence of a wife, because she shouldn't be your wife. But if you have a brother, a mamzer, you can't say your brother's a mamzer. You can't get out of that. Therefore, if it's your brother, you have to be metama for him. That's not called your brother. My timer. In Parshas Mishpatim, when it talks about Avadim, it says that the Isha Biladeh stay with the other, meaning they're not part of your family, and therefore that's not considered a brother. That wouldn't be Mechayev a woman in Ibam. That wouldn't get Yerusha. Mishesh lebednika makom poiter. Zakt Gemara mikol makom lasuyimai. Once again, Reb Yehuda lasuyim mamzer. And there's actually a shaila if one creates a mamzer if he's Mekayim the Chiyuv of Puravu. It's a machlokes Rishonim, and I believe we paskin that one is Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu with a mamzer, even though it's psulim. My timer, the Amarkra uven ein loy. It could have said ein loy when talking about Yibam. If a woman dies, if a man dies and he doesn't have children, it says uvein ein loy, he doesn't have children. But it could have said ein without a yud. This yud is a little extra, and we dash an ein alov. Look for a son. In other words, even if it's not a classic son, it's not a typical type of son like a mamzer. That's also a son that would pater the father, that would pater the mother from doing Yibam.
What's the status of the child of a mamzer? The whole idea we're doing this is to give the brother a shame. The brother is going to marry the wife. What's this?
That's very interesting, because if the whole purpose is to lahakam lachem shame, make her marry a mamzer and a chanami. What?
She's okay. The mother.
The child of a mamzer is always a mamzer. A mamzer can't clean his. There's no way to filter that out. Yeah. The chiv yibum. She'll probably opt for the chalitza option, but yeah, and if he's a mamzer, he'll do it. Okay. Zok the Gemara, the chayiv al makasi. It's when it talks about. Okay, we'll see that later. The chayiv al makasi. If this child hits his father, he's chayiv. There's a famous story. They asked Reb Chaim. They asked Reb Chaim Mazah Shaila. The halacha is if one hits his father, he's chayiv. But how do you really know that it's his father, right? So they bring a raya from there that roiv bilos achar bal. If the parents live together, chances are that it's his father. So someone asked Reb Chaim, why does the Gemara bring a raya from roiv bilos achar bal from Makeh Oven? How come the Gemara didn't bring a raya that roiv bilos achar bal from Mekal Oven? How do you know it's his father? So you must be roiv bilos achar bal. Reb Chaim said very simple. You cannot hit somebody unless you know who it is. You can curse your father even though you don't know who he is. You can say, my father should be cursed. You don't have to know who he is. So Mel, you only have a right at roiv bilos achar bal from Makosei, because there you got to hit the right guy. Okay. Zok to Gemara. The chayiv al makosei, he's chayiv if he hits his father. Amai. Kari kan v'nasi ba'amcha loisar. Perfect Gemara by Amai. Why would you say that this child is chayiv for hitting his father? Kari kan v'nasi ba'amcha loisar. It says you're not allowed to curse a nasi in your amcha. What does that mean? Only if he acts like a proper Jew. This guy who made a mamzer, clearly he's not acting like a proper Jew. So why is the child who hits him chayiv mishum hakasai? So only if his father did tshuva from that znus, only then will there be a chiyuv if a child hits his father. The high bar tshuvu, this fellow the tshuva, he made a mamzer. But nan Shimon ben Nasir Omer Ezer Muluvus Lo Yuchal Liskoin Ze'abal Erba V'Hoylud Mimena Mamzer. Zok Gemara, Ein Yichanami. He can't do complete tshuva. But Hashtemiyah Oisamais Amchu. He's going to have a hard time doing tshuva, but he's still considered Oisamais Amchu because moving forward he's doing the right thing, and therefore there'll be a chiyuv if a child hits such a father. The Gemara works out. It's not according to everybody. I'm sure we'll get up to that Gemara eventually. Taner Rabban. What if someone has a relation with his sister? Bihi bas eishes oven. It also happens to be, it's not only his sister because his father was ma'anis, a woman, but it's also his sister because it's the daughter of his father was married to this woman and had a sister. So what would the halacha be? So Zoktim Archai Mishum Achaisai Umishum Bas Eishes Oven. So there's two psukim. I don't have the psukim with me, but there's two psukim. One that discusses Achoisai, the children of his father, and there's another pasuk that speaks about Bas Eishes Oven. So there's two psukim that discuss Achoisai. One just discusses Achoisai, and one specifically mentions in the pasuk that the daughter of his father's wife. Correct. So what if someone has a relationship with such a girl? What is his oinus? So the halacha is there's actually two isurim. By having relations with one woman, he's actually being over two isurim from the two different psukim, one that discusses just a sister and one that discusses his father's wife's daughter. Zok the Gemara, Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda Omer, Einei chayiv el mishum ha'chosheh b'lvad. He will not have a separate chatos. Karish you can't have twice, but if it's shogig, you want to bring a separate chatos for baseish aviv. It's the only issue we say is over is achos. V'loy mipnei baseish aviv. My tamad rabbanim. What is as far as the rabbanim hold? There's two isurim. They said it's very simple. Michtik siv ervas achoischa basavicha or basimecha, which is one isur, and then the other pasuk says ervas bas eishes avicha. Why did we have the second pasuk of ervas bas eishes avicha? Why do we need that pasuk if it already says ervas achoischa bas avicha or basimecha? So why do you need the second pasuk? Lamali. It must be because there's a separate isser for achaisai, and there's a separate isser umishambas eishes avicha. Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda, he says there's only one isser because Omer Kra achais chahi. In the pasuk of eishes avicha, it says achais chahi. She's your sister. To tell you that mishum achaisai atamachayvoi, this is the isser of achaisai, which we already discussed in a different pasuk, but there's no additional isser of iatamachayvoi mishum bas eishes avicha. So for Rabbanan, my avdilai, the achais chahi is a proclamation in the pasuk of Eishes of Bas Eishes Avicha. Rabbi Yosy has a good point. It seems to tell you that the isser is achais, not an additional isser of Bas Eishes Avicha. So to tell you that not only if she's your sister because she's the daughter of your father, or she's your sister because she's the daughter of your mother, what if she's the daughter of both? What if she's the daughter of both? How do you know over there that there's malchus, that there's a chi of chatos for that? You need a pasuk achosha to tell you that. Isn't that a kal v'chomer? Loymar to teach you she'ein masirim and adin. It teaches you that you cannot apply yisurim because of a kal v'chomer. Now it's already 6:54, and this ein masirim and adin is a sugi unto itself. So let's stop here, and we will continue with this Be'ez Hashem tomorrow. There's so much stuff.